Thank you, Acting President, and I'd like to make a few points about the Renewable Energy Bill, the Renewable Energy Jobs and Investment Amendment Bill 2019. As we know, the bill seeks to establish a renewable energy target of 50% of electricity by 2030 and provides for a determination of the minimum amounts of renewable energy generation capacity required to meet these targets by 2030. The Reason Party will be supporting this bill today. Yes, certainly I think 50% is a very modest target, and I believe that we could definitely do better, but by all discussions 50% is achievable and it's realistic. At the moment we have targets of 25% by 2020, 40% by 2025 and now 50% by 2030. As I said, I believe that's modest, but I also acknowledge and am pleased to see that these targets are going to be reviewed annually so we can see this ever-evolving and fast evolving technologies around renewable energies, and we can see that we can improve on those targets. And I would fully expect that in 12 months we would see changes and improvements to those targets. And of course, we can't let up on the climate emergency that we're facing. More than that, we as the State of Victoria must be leaders in addressing the existential threat of climate change. The forecasts are compelling and the scenarios are devastating. We can't forget for a second that the most important question of our time is how to restore safe climate. Now we must include a transition to zero emissions, and I know Mr. Finn would be laughing about this, and I'm sure we all recall when Mr. Finn reminded us of those happy school days on the hot summer bus where his bare thighs were stuck on that vinyl seat. I'm afraid that, well, I do believe in a climate emergency. The thought of Mr. Finn's bare thighs on that seat call for some sort of emergency brainwashing in for my head. But 50% target will give our industry the confidence it deserves. It'll give industry the confidence to plan, to invest in research and development. It will give a clear understanding that we are serious about the renewable industry in this state. And in many ways it'll ensure that industry understands that the government does have its back in this area. I look forward to seeing the innovations that we will see, and we're certainly seeing those fast, quickly evolving. If you look at Infrastructure Victoria's reports on how the government can provide the levers to renewable energy, and some of that will be things like expanding our car fleet changing our car fleet over to electric cars that will then provide the support that the private sector needs to roll out the infrastructure that we need to transition to electric transport in this state. The Greens amendment seeks to lift the renewable rate to 100%, and on first flush I thought, well, it's aspirational, but why can't we support that? And I think it is laudable, but I think it is aspirational. I think it's just that. And for me, I think at this stage, to give the industry confidence, to give the community confidence that we are serious about this, setting unattainable targets at this point doesn't give them the confidence that they need. And in looking at the Greens plan, it also required by 2030 an investment of $9 billion in public-owned renewable energy. So in the next short time, we would need to invest $9 billion there, plus $500 million in publicly owned storage. Now, I actually have confidence that the private sector can do this, and I have confidence that we can build this. Look, I would love to see it 100% by 2030, but Victoria is not Tasmania. Victoria is not the ACT. We have very different energy requirements here, and I think to set that sort of target now is unattainable and is unrealistic. I will be very happy to revisit this on an annual basis to see how we can keep pushing those targets up. And I would love to stand here corrected to see that that was attainable in 10 years. But at this stage, I don't believe that it is. In anticipation of my good colleague, Mr. Borman, speaking, he circulated some amendments to us all earlier this week and around adding hydro to the list of renewables. And I think this is a very sensible proposal, a very sensible amendment. Victoria is probably the second best state when it comes to hydro power. The ANU did a study where they reported there was about 4,400 sites that had the potential for pumped hydro storage. These sites would have the capacity to store over 11,000 gigawatt hours and enough to power over 200,000 homes for an entire year. So the Reason Party has a policy to invest in further feasibility studies into the possibilities for such sites in order to assist with our transition away from non-renewable sources. So Reason supports the move for the 50%. I do hope we can get higher. As I said earlier, I hope that the Greens are right and that 100% is attainable. But at this stage, I don't believe that it is, and I will support the move to 50%.